Should I read it, or Mike, do you have it?
The one I have in my email is identical to the one we have in front of us.
Okay, so my change was, sorry, I'm losing my voice. The board may waive or modify any part of these regulations or impose reasonable conditions if it believes that the specific circumstances of the proposal justify such action and that the waiver aligns with the spirit and intent of these regulations.
I like
And
that.
when I said I liked it better, I just like it better than this one here. I do
Yeah.
agree with this as well, but like for a starting point on it, I like that.
I agree. I think where we're hung up is where does it say when would the board deny the conditional use permit for this thing? And that's not,
Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing, Henry, really with any application that the planning board gets.
okay.
You know, it's, the way it's supposed to work is we have our regulations and ordinances so that the applicant knows what's expected of them. And if they comply, then the planning board is expected to approve that application. Obviously, there are times when it's appropriate to not approve, and you have got language, and Jack has pointed out some of the, I think, weaknesses in our existing regulations where the language could be strengthened, where it's not perhaps clear that you always have the authority to ask for more information and to deny if, obviously, based on, you know, good reason. You can't just deny for no reason, and that language can certainly be strengthened. But that lies within your site plan and subdivision regulations in any case. So,
Okay.
you know, trying to find a way to give you justification to deny something is, you know, I don't really have an answer to that, frankly, because, you know, every application is going to be different, and the reasons for a denial will very likely be different. And they've got to be based on, you know, very good evidence that there's some pretty significant public harm. Otherwise, if they followed all of the regulations that the planning board has prepared and the
Yeah.
voters have adopted,
Yeah,
and, you know, it's
permitted.
difficult.
Yeah, Carol, I interpreted conditional use to be a little bit more in between than what you're describing, but I may not have it right. That was the intent of the conditional use law, was to provide, like, it's not allowed by right, and there's more discretion as to how the planning board looks at it.
No, Jack, it is allowed by right, but it's a process that's actually intended to take the place of a special exception. You know, in the early days of zoning, you had, where you didn't have planning boards with really much experience or education, and you didn't have good site plan review regulations, the special exception was a way to take those things that may not fit, it might fit in one place, but may not fit in another necessarily, and if it doesn't, send it to the zoning board to go through the special exception process. Over time, we have thankfully figured out that that doesn't always make sense anymore, because zoning boards they're not really geared to be doing planning board work, which is what the special exceptions kind of force them into doing. So the special permit or conditional use permit, it can go by either name, was an alternative to the zoning board to give the planning board flexibility, not necessarily to be more stringent, but to be able to work through issues that without it would send the applicant to the zoning board and then back to the planning board and then maybe back to the zoning board. So it's intended to streamline the process and provide the flexibility so that the planning board can work with an applicant without having to send them for a variance for the slightest little thing that doesn't comply 100% with the language of the zoning ordinance. and that you can impose conditions, so thus the conditional use permit. You have the authority to do that.
Okay.
Just as an observation, it sounds like to me that the discussion is really bouncing around the idea of what do we want the rural district, overall the town, to look like 5, 10, 15 years from now. And it sounds like to me, as an observer, that we thought, the town thought when we put through the solar ordinance, or the solar ordinance was put through, we thought that we'd be, the town, there might be more interest in that. And now that of course someone's put something through like that, everybody's like, oh, wait, maybe we don't want this. So rather than trying, it sounds like, once again, this is just from over listening to the meetings and the discussion over the solar ordinances and the rural district in general, is do we want the rural district, because like it or not, we're changing, we're growing. So things are going to be built whether people like it or not. And so I think the role of the planning board in this area might be to say, do we want these things, and if they are gonna happen, how do we want them to happen? So rather than changing special exception, creating special exceptions and going through the permit, we might wanna revisit the zoning ordinances and say, rather than, I heard earlier that there was I was listening, and the idea of increasing lot sizes for residential houses, right now it's at 2, increase it to like 5 or 10, because in theory, I don't remember how big the solar lot is, but let's say it's 30 acres. In New Hampshire, they just changed it to 2 units by right. And so if we have 2-acre lots, that's 60 units by right if someone wanted to go through the work to subdivide that. And so there's more legislation coming through the House this year to increase it to 3 units by right. So if it increases to 3 units, then we're at 90 units on a 30-acre lot by right. And so do we want to, do we want it to be, maybe we increase lot sizes, maybe there's something to be done like that, about that, because we do have lots of big lots in town. Like there are huge parcels of land all over town. 30-acre lots, 20-acre lots, there's, all over town. So in theory, if someone wanted to develop this stuff, a 10-acre lot could in theory have 10 units. So 5 buildings, 10 units, and that's, once again, it's great, we need to grow, but 10 units is, who's gonna live there? Are they gonna have children? Is that gonna increase our services to ambulance, fire? Do we, once again, I'm a real estate agent. I think houses are great. We do need houses. We have a lack of building in this area. But do we want lots of little houses on little lots? Or do we want a few nice houses on larger lots? Do we want, maybe a solar field in the middle of a couple hundred acres instead of like, okay, you meet your minimum requirement of 30 acres, you're good to go. So, I think maybe the way to go about this might be lot size increases or changes. And so like for the downtown area, do we want people to be focused downtown? Or, because we could go to 0 distance zoning, so like where we have some of the houses in the square, none of these buildings on the square, or the common, are conforming to current zoning. But, do we want people to live out in the middle of the woods, all together in little clusters? Or do we want, what does the board or the town really want? And I think we're dancing around, people don't, we might not want, people might not want to say, no, we don't want this, but ultimately it's, you can give it to the town and say, the people at town meeting want a bunch of lots, a bunch of solar fields, like, we pushed through the solar ordinance this year, everybody thought it was a good idea. Someone came along and said, hey, I want to build one. A lot of people came out and said, maybe not. So, I think it's revisiting, maybe making criteria stricter. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, I was on the planning board years ago and we tried to change the lot sizes because we seen the growth coming in our direction and we got shot down cold turkey.
But that's, just now with a new planning board, I think that might be something.
It's not the planning
Either
board,
the
it's
town
the people.
decides.
Well, right, the town, town might wanna decide, but that might be something the planning board might wanna put in front of the town, seeing as, we had a solar development that came through, it's gonna get built no matter what at this point, and it didn't seem like the neighbors wanted that.
Still has to get built.
But it's still gonna get built, but that's, if we say you're allowed to do it, it gets voted on town meeting, by right is by right, it doesn't matter if nobody likes it, and if you meet all their special exceptions, which these guys did. I remember when they came to the meeting, and they were gonna ask for an exception for a couple little bit of land to meet it, and they said, oh, we don't actually need that, and they said, that's fine, it'll be easier for us, and so they changed it, so I think maybe looking at the regulations that are allowing the stuff to happen might be, the way to go. This was my 2 cents. Hi, Carol.
I mean, one option, Carol, you said the planner in Rochester, one option might be to have a conversation with them and see if this is provided the discretion for them or not.
Well, I didn't speak with him, we just shared a couple of emails. He feels that it works well for them, but they get, he said approximately 12 applications a year for uses that use the conditional use permit process. So, that's a very different level than what we've been experiencing.
I don't want to do 12 a year.
It's after meetings.
Why is it so hot in here?
I guess on this, I think I'd like to see a more, you said you had finalized this more?
I could work with Carol and try to flush it out more.
Why don't we flesh it out a little more?
If that's okay with you, Carol?
Yes, absolutely, happy to.
Okay.
Do people agree we liked the Carol's revised language though, that she read aloud? I
Yeah,
think that's an improvement.
yeah.
Yeah.
I still think we have to visit number 6, whether or not we go with his, whether or not we add the conditional uses.
Yeah, that was her reading there. Maybe we just need to see it in front of us to make a motion on it.
We can bring that to the next meeting.
Do we wanna table this until that?
Yeah, I think we'll table this to the next meeting, until we get maybe a little more fleshed out copy, then we can see that in print, what she's read off. Should be nice to have it in print.
What is it, the 18th?
Yes, 18th for the next meeting. You think that'll be good for you, Jack?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And then, so, next one we discussed was manufactured housing. I haven't heard back from the lawyer and a couple other people, so I'd like to just hold off on that one. Not really touch it until we hear back.
What's the question we're waiting for?
What is so the House bill, what does it specifically mean for us? Does it actually mean we have to allow, I'm waiting for, have legal look it over.
I think it's written right in at the top of the bill. Wasn't it?
I called, I can't think of it, I called one of the representatives that sponsored HB 1361, which is changing the verbiage in 67432. And I think, if I may, I have printed it here somewhere. I don't think, based on what we heard and what we know, that it is, we don't have all the information yet on whether we can stop
Correct,
it
that's what
or
I'm
let it,
waiting for.
yeah,
That's what I'm waiting for.
yeah, cause it's talking about reasonable and realistic, and there's, I mean, just as a person living in town, I have questions about it, and I I don't see how we, even if I was a member, right, like a full-time member, I don't see how we could vote on it right now, because I don't think we have all of the information.
Yeah, that's why, I don't wanna discuss tonight, cause we don't have all the information yet, I think it just,
What, just for clarification, what information are you looking
legal, I asked the lawyer,
for? The question
what,
is,
how does that impact us? Do we have to change our ordinance to allow?
the first line of the official summary is this bill mandates that municipalities.
Yes. There was quite a discussion, I just felt it was best
Is
to.
there a question on mandates, the meaning of mandate?
I don't understand, what are you, you're saying it's a done deal and it should just go through?
I think we can adjust the ordinances to provide, like, the reasonable and realistic is up to us.
Right,
But the fact that at some point in the, you know, we're not in compliance until we do change these laws, that we are mandated to change, well, unless we're mandated to change those ordinances to allow for the reasonable, and our discretion is what is realistic and reasonable. Not that we can just say no
right.
to any of those, and that we have to have some sort of like 51% of the land in town.
It's
be
funny that Mike,
reasonable and
Oops, sorry.
realistic to manufactured housing.
I was looking also at, cause I think, was her name Miss March, I don't, what was her name, Marchant? The lady,
Sarah Marchant.
yeah, the lady that came, she brought up that there's a well-run, I think, mobile park in Rochester. It was just funny that you pulled up their stuff, cause I went and looked at their ordinances, and I was wondering if we could look at theirs and maybe look at adopting some of their,
They're a lot bigger city though, so you'd start adopting larger.
well, just some of the
stuff
wording
for
and some of the
smaller
intent
towns.
though.
Right, so my question is, like, we're not.
They might allow more though, that's the issue.
Allow
Are you
more,
asking the
They
legality?
might have
of them?
larger lots, we have even small lots to allow more density, so. But we'd have to really see what theirs says.
it's
But
worth
that-
looking at. I could print it out if you want me to and email it out to everybody,
Yeah.
if you're interested in seeing it.
That's if we have to delve into that, I mean, I'm waiting just to see if we even have to, maybe we're perfectly fine. Whatever they passed the town meeting was fine,
Yeah,
or
I
good.
guess I'm confused
I'm confused about what?
on what the legal question is, that's all.
Well, cause
Like
realistically,
whether we have to allow the expansion.
Mhm. That's the question. I know the first three are ors. We're understanding that the shall allow existing parks to expand is a shall means you must type, or does it just mean, you know, that's kind of what we're clarifying. That part. We're clarifying the existing park portion of it.
have you contacted the municipality, foundation or, no,
Association.
association? They said, that's who I talked to. I talked to a lawyer there and they're willing, they won't give specifics on, you know, like Troy, but they can help explain how this works. And I guess we're members of it and we can avail ourselves of their legal expertise. Have you guys done that?
I haven't, I contacted our town lawyer, because he technically be the one to.
I can, yeah, I have a phone number and I spoke to a man named Jonathan and he's an attorney. They're a nonprofit. We pay a yearly membership, the planning board does, to be members of it, and they're willing to give you legal advice generic. They can't be specific about
Well,
Troy
that's-
and stuff.
Yeah, no, I get that, can't be specific about Troy, yeah.
But that's a resource maybe that could help explain reasonable and realistic and the other stuff.
Yeah, I think
I think that's really our discretion on that part of it.
yeah, that part of it, actually, I don't think there's a question on that. The question is the shall allow existing parks to expand is the
I don't
question.
think shall was even the verbiage I'm trying to pull up.
it is,
Yeah.
it is shall.
Shall
It is shall.
It would say may if it
Right.
was
Okay,
flexibility.
yeah.
Isn't that how you-
Shall-
It's right here. This is
Shall
the-
means must.
this is the-
Well,
is
yeah.
that, oh, you have
Per-
it too? Okay.
So just
Yeah, that's
to,
where I printed it off of.
just to
Okay.
clarify a couple of things, still referring to House Bill 1361, you can actually refer to the statute because it's a law. It's not a House bill.
Got signed by the governor in May and it
It's
became
done,
effective
it's
July
law.
19th.
And the first part of it, I think, is being overlooked. We're really concentrating on like expansion of of one existing property. But the law says that you now have to allow manufactured housing either on its own lot in 51% of your properties, or you have to allow new parks and subdivisions on 51% of your properties, or both. That's a bigger issue than talking about the expansion of one property. Because you're talking about the entire town, and you're talking about potentially allowing manufactured housing in most of it, or allowing new parks and subdivisions for manufactured housing in most of it. And the board has to decide pretty quickly which way they're gonna go. And those two issues are much bigger than the expansion of the one existing property.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
before you get bogged down with a lot of that, you
Yeah,
might wanna go through the first sections of the actual law. Because I think that certainly has more impact to the town than what we're circling around here.
so may I add to that, Kyle? So there's some discussion about section E. It's a foregone conclusion, you have to allow the reasonable and realistic opportunity for the expansion of manufactured housing parks exist. This is the one park that we're talking about. You have to do it. You had a zoning amendment that was proposed last year. It needs to be edited to accommodate the little bit of language that's going on in here. You have manufactured housing park ordinance specific for Troy. It's actually very comprehensive, lays out interior roads, it lays out all the setbacks, it does all of the things that you need to do, which would be this board's easy argument to say, we've already established what's reasonable and what's realistic and reasonable. So I think our point is spending one more minute on E when you have to do it anyway, and you already have all the parts and pieces in place. Heck, you have the zoning amendment mostly written from last year. Spending one more minute on E and not anything on the above and running the risk of not having a decision made by the time town meeting comes, you're literally you're gonna run the risk of having somebody come in and sue and put in a whole new park or put in mobiles on their own lots without this board or the townspeople having a chance to explore those ideas and which one they actually want. Because if you haven't decided, the law requires that you do one of these, you do A, B and C, or A, B and C. E is automatic, you have to do that. That's not even a choice. So if you haven't done all of those things, you've got 47 days before the first public hearing to deal with this. So, and there's a lot to talk about. I mean, like in the master plan, you want to figure out what is the 51% of land and or lots in the residential district. The master plan actually has that for you, fortunately. But there's a lot of stuff that you guys got to get through to get that done in 47 days. So.
That's a lot of time. I don't see why this has to be rushed. I mean, 47, why can't this,
So 47 days.
It took a
actually,
year to
isn't
get
really-
through.
You figure you meet every other week? That's 2 more meetings?
yeah, but is it too, like, if you don't have all the information, I don't understand. You said, you just said.
I don't have the information for what E is for legal.
I just feel like that's kind of like a scare tactic. Oh, if we don't get this done,
We're not in
51% more people are gonna, I don't know, I don't think we have all the information.
We're
Well,
not
you
in
can sit on your
compliance
hands
with the
and
state.
you'll be illegal.
Even right now. So if we put it off, we're out of compliance for
Yeah.
another year or more.
Yeah, and anybody that wants to just go right to Superior Court and look for a declaratory judgment.
So there's
Because the
people
zoning
running
is-
in here to buld mobile parks?
No, but you gotta plan
Not
for
yet.
possible.
We
Not
already
yet.
have 97 manufactured homes in Troy. I counted them. It's
So no, there's
97
no
of
one
them already.
knocking on
We
the
do
door.
not need more.
But when we wrote the solar ordinance, there was no one knocking down the door to put a
Right.
solar farm down. But we tried to plan ahead, found we needed to probably tweak some stuff, which is what we discussed.
You
But
don't react
so a lot of this stuff, the
to,
planning board is trying to think ahead, like, what happens if someone comes in?
Right, well, planning, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
The issue with this is, we're kind of being rushed towards this town meeting to make decisions. This 47 days sounds like, oh, we don't have to rush that fast. But if you're only meeting every other week,
we knew about
we gotta make a
this
yeah,
in the spring.
yeah.
Or should we think along July?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of time. This was voted
Discussed
on
it
on May
numerous
8th.
times between.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming, and really it's just coming up now. So there has been quite a bit of time, and I'd hate to see the town or the board go into, you know, whatever may come in complete violation of state statute.
Yeah,
Because
your
then
butt's
it-
hanging out, big time.
Yeah, I don't know what happens after that.
Yeah, I think we have a responsibility to the voters to put something before them at town meeting and have them decide. If they wanna not be in compliance with the law, that's a town vote, but I think we should at least get to the point where we put something in front of them that's in compliance with the law.
I couldn't agree more. Then you've at least done your job,
Right.
right? And if the
Literally.
townspeople say, no, we want to be out of compliance, well, they have added that risk that we're talking about.
Right.
So if that's what they decide to do. So, the one thing that I would change in any of the amendments that you make, that in the gray area where you describe the purpose of the zoning amendment, that you describe, much like you've done with the amendment tonight for the flood insurance program, is that you're doing this to adhere to state law. It isn't about adding more housing or whatever, it is the law. So if people understand that, you at least don't run the risk of someone just saying, well, I don't like manufactured housing. That actually doesn't matter.
And that is in our copy as what's proposed.
Perfect.
It cites that the changes, this is proposed due to the change in state law.
Thank you, yeah.
So are we gonna work on the ordinances then before, I mean, that's the problem, right, is the wording and the ordinances that have to meet?
Yeah,
So that has to be done before,
that's what we're doing right
Anything, right?
now.
Okay.
Yep, that's what
Alright.
all these lines and bold and,
Yeah, we've just done it for everything but, well, several things, but this one, right now, we're on a topic that seems to be the hot topic.
Kyle, can I ask Ben a question?
Yep.
So, section E, I know it's a minor part,
Mhm.
but it's old. Is there anything that's in section E that you're aware of that's?
What's old?
where's
The ordinance.
Oh, 1996 ordinance?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, as I understand it.
Yep.
Not
I mean-
section E, but the
yeah.
town manufactured,
Yes.
home ordinance.
No, actually, we've had, I was looking, I think it was Franklin.
Adopted 83, amended 395.
And my question is are you aware of any state law or anything that's changed so our ordinance is no longer in compliance,
Right. the
out of
only-
date with state law?
Right, the only thing that's in our ordinance, I think, is the pad siting. It allows for like crushed stone or something like that. The
Yep.
state actually has regulations that require you can't get your seal from the state if you don't follow the state guidelines. They have their own guidelines that you have to follow, so that's not correct in our zoning, but the state can care of.
And that's all
part
you're
of it.
aware of?
That's all I'm aware of.
So we could just adopt state guidelines on pad requirements.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you were
you
looking
have
to
to
make an
anyway.
adjustment in there, that's the way that would be, but quite honestly, preemption plays a role here, and there is no home rule in New Hampshire, so the state guideline for those pads is the
Prevails.
prevailing rule. So, even though the ordinance is out of whatever, we have to adhere to that when we're putting the home in. The building inspector won't give us a CO if we don't adhere to those guidelines, even though the manufactured housing park ordinance is out of date in that one regard.
We have a pretty extensive ordinance. In fact, I think it was the town of Franklin. A lot of towns are dealing with this exact same thing. How do we handle this in what they're looking to do? And they were actually looking at Troy's zoning ordinance specifically. Because
To
we
add
have
to
a-
their own because they had nothing.
We have a
for-
fairly comprehensive manufactured housing park ordinance.
so no, don't take offense at this, but why are we taking advice from the people who have the most invested interest in this going through? They're telling you what they want done and what should be done and what should be changed, but you guys have a huge,
I'm telling you what the law says.
Yeah.
You can
but how do
go
you
on.
know, how do we know, so does everyone know that that's correct?
If you can't read this statute,
I
Right
can't,
here.
no, I can, I have,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Okay.
read a lot of RSAs, and
This is cut and dry as it gets.
I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just trying to understand.
If there's anything that we can supply to
So
support
basically,
the
the short
comments that we
answer
make.
is, if anyone from the public shows up at this meeting,
If what?
anyone from the public shows up at the meeting, they can talk, it's a public meeting.
Oh, yeah, no, I get
They
that,
obviously, you could say they have vested interest, but they're still public.
right.
He can talk if he wants.
I'm not saying,
He
I'm
can,
just,
he can
again,
give his
questioning
opinion
it.
on a manufactured housing, he may not live in one,
Right,
does that mean he can't give his opinion?
Which
So-
I
I'm
have
not
a
saying
lot
that.
of.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm saying, just use an example.
Right, but that would be.
Oh, no, I went to
Well,
a manufactured housing ordinance, and it says no new trailer parks, no extensions, no this, no that. And when it gets down to conflict, it says point blank, that the one that is the most stringent, it says, any other statute or ordinance or regulation which imposes the greater restriction or higher standard shall govern. Which we say, no, it's a higher standard, it governs.
It doesn't.
And we have to adopt them other two sections of colon 31 and 32 in order to be making them possible to be used. And if we don't adopt them, they don't happen.
The state supersedes town
Well, then the
ordinance.
state will have to supersede, because I'm gonna guarantee you, the people in town are gonna say no, just like they did last year.
That's fine.
It's fine, it's absolutely
Yeah.
fine. It will not matter because the state supersedes and
I don't believe
And
it.
our
It's called,
section
it's called
eight.
preemption. We do not have home rule in the state of New Hampshire. What you're talking about is home rule. And we do not have that in the state of New Hampshire. The state prevails. The state law prevails.
and the state law
It's been laid out.
has been laid out.
The issue we'll run into is if we do not make some sort of regulation around this, then we leave it wide open. So if we don't make any kind of realistic and, you know, we could make it unrealistic to some degree and fight that, right? But we need to do something, otherwise.
And I agree, Mike, and my point
This
is,
is where
it's
I-
our responsibility to the voter.
Well,
We don't wanna
she
make
brought it
that
up
decision for the
and-
voter, we wanna put it in front of.
We have to put
the
something forward.
Right, it's just our job.
Yeah.
If they decide the same thing, no, on everything we put forward, that's what they decide, it may bring us into non-compliance with the state.
Yeah.
But we have to do our diligence here, and offer something,
That's my
or put forward something, I'm not sure what the word you wanna use is, but we have to.
I have a question. Are these the only two options? So we have, I would imagine that she was the one who recommended these. So you have option one is delete the paragraph. Option two. On the wording on option two, is stuff like that, or can we,
No, this is.
that
what-
language we change?
This is what, yeah,
Okay.
this is what Carol had suggested as possible option.
Right. So,
And these only kind of reply to what's in our current ordinance.
And
If we're gonna allow manufactured houses on single lots, we have nothing in place, we have to actually create something.
Right, I think
Well,
that
well,
was
that's
to
like they
their
were saying,
point,
something that needs to be.
right, to their point is, we can argue about this till we're blue in the face, but if we don't at least put something forward for individual lots or subdivisions, then we leave that wide open for new parks and individual, and manufactured homes on individual lots, so by not doing anything, you have the possibility of someone doing whatever they want. And when it comes to that, if there's no,
Also, by not doing anything, we have where, the issue we had earlier, when Jack says we don't have a way to say no.
right,
Having something gives you a say.
let's, like, for example, and this is just an example, and I'll make it outlandish, so like, let's say that if we wanna allow subdivisions for this, we make it, it's like a 100-acre minimum, and they have to give a 30-acre open space, right? Like, it might not be reasonable or realistic if there's a rule in place, around it, where, you know, it makes it very difficult. Then they can argue possibly that it's not reasonable or realistic, but at least we're in compliance
But wouldn't we have to do the same as what we already have?
It's not reasonable and realistic.
on whose judgment, right? Like, that's outlandish,
That's what I'm
right?
saying, it's,
Right, but,
but even doing nothing, and the townspeople vote no, and we're still gonna be in.
if
not
there's
in-
nothing in place, that means it's almost a given.
But if the
that
town votes it
anything-
down, we're still in non-compliance.
Right, but we gotta allow
So-
that for the town to decide, so it's not the planning board's job to decide that for them.
It's just our job to enjoy the headache prior. So I guess, jumping back to that Houseville, do you have any? It talks about individual lots, subdivisions, or new parks.
And realistic expansion for existing parks.
So yeah, the A,
And that's
B,
the,
think
that
all
last
folks-
one is the only one that's in front of us
Yeah.
tonight.
And the subdivisions and new parks are coupled together, you gotta, if you go that route, you gotta do them both.
no.
I
One
think
or
it's
the
more.
other.
No.
No, A,
Subdivisions.
B, C, or A, B, and C.
Yes.
So an A is on their own lots, B is subdivisions, C is new parks. So it's either A,
Well,
B and C, or A, B, and C. E is a foregone conclusion.
right, I think that's why we have this in front of us, because it's an easy no-brainer, because we have to allow it anyway.
Yeah. That was our opinion on it, is we know you got a lot in front of you to get this done, and why you would spend any more time on E than you absolutely have to, when you've got everything already in place, would make no sense to me.
I think you threw out your preference at the meeting, but I'll throw out my preference. I would go for either individual lots, or if we can do BC on something like a conservation district. And I don't know if that would meet the requirement or not, if that would make it, it's getting at what you want, of controlling the density.
Yeah, and then the argument becomes, is this reasonable or not, and, does someone wanna pay that fight where it's an automatic win in a no, with no rule, it's an automatic win, or, does someone really wanna die on that hill?
And maybe BC with conservation district is reasonable, I don't know, we have to research that and figure that out. But I'm not opposed to trying to go individual lots either, those are kind of where my thinking is on the two options.
I think I'd rather go for an individual lot. It's probably a little easier to write something up, user first control.
Kyle, this is from a master plan from
Would our rural district get us 51%?
That's the document that you need right there, because it actually lays out, and I think the way the regulation is written, that when you're talking about the first three, is that you have to have most, but not necessarily all, so that's definition of most is between 50 and 99, so it's 51%. And it lays out land areas and lots, so you need to look at the total acreage you have in those zones, and then you have to look at the lots, and that actually, these two graphs lay them out. And I don't know, it's probably changed a little bit since then, but maybe not that much. But it gives you a way to choose various zones and add them up in such a way that'll give you, I mean, then there's the option of creating an overlay district of some description as well, if you wanted to do that, specific to manufactured housing. I don't know exactly how that works, but
Yeah, and can you cover your bases by allowing subdivisions in one district and individual lots in another district?
right, and each one of those has the same provision, each one of those sections, and it's most but not all land area and lots, and it's residential, it's all residential stuff.
But I think there may be some ambiguity in that part, in the definition of, on individual lots. In most, but not necessarily all, land areas and lots. So I don't know if there's ambiguity there to go 51% of land areas rather than try to
Well, we don't have,
put the lots.
the other thing
in-
too is, the current, I assume the current parks would count towards that 51%. So it's not like we're adding 51% to town,
Good point.
it's
yeah.
probably a portion minus the current.
But the first clause in that is on individual lots. And that's
Yeah,
not,
good.
that's different
Not an
than
individual
how
lot,
parks.
How many do we have right now that are on individual lots? I know we do have some
Oh, yeah.
from the pre-ordinance, no.
I'm not sure.
Not sure either, I could find out for you, but I'd do a little research, I have a list of every
This
house in town.
assessor's database.
So we don't feel the current parks would count towards that 51%?
Well, it says,
How can we
Find out.
51% trailers? Or manufactured housing, why would we want 51% in a little town like this?
It's the law. It's the law. Jeez, you gotta talk to the state house, man. You don't think so? Jeez.
I guess
Talk
I'm
to the
not
government.
patient.
The law doesn't force a town into trailer parks.
No, but it
No, it
forces
doesn't.
manufactured housing.
Yes, it does.
Doesn't force you into that, but it forces you into, if you don't want that, it forces you into putting them on their own lot.
on the lot.
Yeah, well, my question is, do the current ones count towards the 51%? Or are they separate, and we have to take the remaining single lots, and 51% of those have to be allowed to be trailers? Is what I'm asking. Or does the 51% of total land in Troy include, let's say, the
Too many
current parts do
questions,
20% of the property? We only have to really allow 30% left, is my question. Are we allowed, what's currently there count towards that 51%?
So who answers that?
That could be an NHMA question.
Right.
That's a
Yeah.
legal question, but
Yeah.
That's my question.
You would still
I
need
mean,
to know where you want to
51%
put
sounds
it.
pretty bad, but what if we check how much the current parks take up? And then we're like, oh,
I think there's like
But-
823 houses and 97 are manufactured.
yeah.
I believe that's the right numbers.
You could get bogged down with that question, Kyle, and only come to find out that whatever the acreage of the parks doesn't actually make that much of a difference, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
'cause
Like, you weren't close enough to have it matter.
Yeah, because it could be acres, not number of houses.
Well, yeah, 40 acres in two existing parks, or 42 acres or whatever it is versus the land mass of Troy.
Right,
I
what's,
think that's
what's
probably
the
Because it
small-
goes
what's
small
the
by
biggest
acreage.
chunk on there?
acreage, not by
Yeah.
by
number.
lots, yeah. I think what Kyle's getting at is it would count towards a lot of lots.
Yeah,
So
If
2
you're
lots.
if you're counting lots instead of acres, all of the lots in the parks is a
no, it has to be land lots. I can't imagine to have the RSA considering the unsubdivided sections of a mobile home park, actual lots. Lots of record, those are not lots of record. That would be my guess.
I can ask that I can get it in an email if you want.
Yeah, get an email.
I'll email
Stuff in
Jonathan
print is always
tomorrow.
better.
Okay, I'll call him tomorrow and then ask him to send the answer in an email so that it's
Yeah, just so we
coming
have
from
that.
someone, yeah, okay,
just
I'll do it
curious how
tomorrow
that
and I'll
affects.
let you know.
And part of that question is assuming that we're gonna, like, we can somehow get an exact 51%.
Yeah.
I don't know that
But
that's.
if I'm reading this right, and it might not be, but the rural district gets us 52% of lots and 81% of land. So
Right.
bam,
Right, so you
done.
could, yeah.
Right.
If it's right,
if
if, you know, well, I
It's-
think,
it's right.
I think the
It's right.
document is right, but if it's right for the town,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it was right for the town like 10 years ago, right? Or less than that.
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago when they changed.
I don't know how long it was in place before then, but I think that should be kind of like our starting point for
Going back to
solving
that ordinance, see how it's written.
Well, it's as simple as adding manufactured homes as permitted use for the rural district. Just that one,
Because then it
one
would
new
be
line.
all, it'd be the setback, septic, it'd follow all the
Right.
same guidelines.
I don't disagree with Lottie, but we gotta remember that manufactured homes don't look like they did 20 years ago. And you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference from, I mean, depending on what model, but I dare to say some might be nicer than the inside.
I got a comment on that. So our building inspector also works for Winchester and they're going through the same process. I think they just had a meeting last night and they're getting ready to propose something. And one of the things he said was, any of the homes, the new homes coming into these or considered new construction, he would hope to have them meet current building standards and current HUD standards, which to Mike's point is way different than a mid-1980s. So I don't know what the laws are surrounding allowing you to make sure that they meet current building code, because they could be bringing an old home from somewhere else and bringing it into our town, and it could be like late 70s or something like that, just after HUD was adopted, and it's got 2x3 walls in it. So that's a little something to consider when you're talking about that. So it's probably more than just adding it to the district that manufactured are permitted. Well, manufactured are permitted maybe to a degree that doesn't allow a 1978 just barely
Can we do
HUD
it?
adopted home. I don't know.
Well, you could do,
I don't know. I know they were talking.
new manufacturing. It has to be new.
We kind of skirted this last time, and I don't know whether it was Carol or somebody else, but it was like a discrimination thing if we were to do that.
Well, reasonable to ask for new. Or
Well, I think the
In the
building
last 10
inspector was
years?
really looking at it from, if I'm inspecting it and it
Right.
doesn't pass the 2018 HUD or the 2024
Right.
building codes that it's required to pass, I can't issue a CO. I think that was the baseline that he was going on. Again, it just needs to be explored a little more, so.
I mean, wouldn't it be reasonable to allow new? That doesn't really create an unreasonable expectation, not allow manufactured housing in single lots.
Can you say that again, Kyle?
To only allow new manufactured housing on single lots.
Yeah, as opposed to ones that don't meet the new
Yeah,
heights.
rather than just saying allow manufactured housing on individual lots, saying new, that requires, one is new, so it has to meet the latest standards for that year.
Leftover 77?
Yeah, so, and just saying new and not referencing, let's say HUD 2018, in 10 years, if they've updated twice, because we use the word
Just
new,
The current.
it automatically
Yeah,
covers and
yeah,
kind of, I guess, pulls in the new standards.
right.
And Carol has that on the, some of the changes.
It would
for this,
say
it'll just the
exactly.
current hood,
Yeah.
Manufactured homes, parentheses, that meet current HUD
Current HUD and building codes.
standards, yeah.
I think that'd be
That's a
considered a
specific, right?
reasonable
Demonstrated
Yeah.
compliance.
allowance,
Yeah.
And that's, but this is specific.
while still putting some restrictions.
Existing manufactured housing parks.
Oh, okay. Talking
We're
about
talking
the
about
expansion.
individual lots.
Right.
So,
So one last comment. So you have the two options. It doesn't sound like you're going to be leaning towards doing all three anyway, A, B, and C. But in conversations we've had casually with people around town, I've been surprised to hear more often than not people talking about, well, I'd rather have a new park, so I know where all the manufacturers is ending up, than having homes on their individual lot right next to my $600,000 house. So I thought that was going to not be the case ever, but I've heard it on multiple occasions. So
Yeah.
And to
yeah,
build
so
on
I don't.
that, we
So I
could-
was surprised by that.
Right, and to build on that, you could,
Give
especially
more-
if it was done as a subdivision, you could make it so it was, that would be however you wanted it in
Yeah.
that space.
Has to
right?
look how you want, set up how you want.
Yeah, that would go through all the site plan process, the whole development process, and certainly some more parameters you could.
And make it
you
less
could-
attractive to someone to come in and do it and all that, right?
Yeah, bigger, yeah, a bit higher bar or
Right.
whatever. But yeah, in talking with various people, that I was surprised. I would not have thought that would have been,
I
anybody would
think
have
it
said
makes
that,
sense,
but.
because again, right, you
I
have
think
a
maybe
lot.
we have to put both forward, and let townspeople decide what they want.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Is if you were going to have a public hearing for those two, you would have those two parts to start with, and take some feedback and see what you're getting. But
Maybe just a handful of people we talked to were one way.
yeah, exactly. You want to get overwhelming.
Well,
Yeah, they should be on their own lots, period,
Yeah.
or whatever. So
The only thing I'm concerned with is what Sarah said, and I wasn't familiar with that at the last meeting. She said, once we put it to public hearing, the time between the public hearing and the town meeting, that's the ordinance that the town lives by.
I question that.
I'd check into that.
Yeah, I would
don't
look.
think
I would
that's
look
right.
closely at that. That doesn't sound right.
It's what she
No
said.
way.
Yeah, I
didn't
know. I
heard
can't.
it.
Yeah. She might have misspoke or something because.
It hasn't been adopted by the town, you can't use it.
Right, that's like some type of interim zoning, and there's really specific things that you can do interim zoning for. And it's usually to restrict.
Yeah, we heard her say that. Herb and I looked at each other. That's
Right.
I don't think that one's correct, but.
Otherwise, anything we propose would be in effect.
yeah, I
Because
thought
let's say we did something,
Yeah, because what if
I
they
had
get
heard
turned
that
down?
before. I had heard that before. I
Yeah,
don't know where it
You
came
have,
from.
you have heard that?
Yeah, I had heard it before. In this room. But I don't have a source, so.
yeah, you could propose an amusement park.
Right, and then one goes up
Just,
between
no,
them
we
town
don't want
meeting.
that, and somebody quick puts one in.
Yeah, exactly. That seems like, yeah, that doesn't seem
Yeah.
like a natural reality of planning.
the only thing I could think of is like, if someone came into the planning board, let's say in February, we just had a public hearing, in January, so we might be obligated to let them know, hey, the ordinance is going forward saying this. I guess you'd be obligated to let them know what the ordinance may become, because it could affect a decision if they don't apply before then. So I think you might be obligated to let them know what might happen. Not that it's come into effect, but hey, this might come into effect. This might affect you if you don't apply before March 12th, let's say, whatever the date is. I think that's not said correctly, that it is an ordinance from the public hearing to town meeting. But I think it would be prudent for a board to notify someone coming in that, hey, this is going forward, this could affect you. I.e. Rewild technically came to us before town meeting, before we finished the solar ordinance. They were updated and stuff as it went along. So obviously that could change your plans for application. But I don't think it would be an actual enforceable ordinance. I think it's more courtesy. That's what it should be.
I don't know. So we need a strategy. I mean, one
You need
thing
more
we could
time.
do- yeah. Well, I mean, I like the idea of putting all of the proposals forward in the public hearing,
I mean, I think
and then we can cut back at that point after we've heard, public feedback.
public
I think
feedback.
that's the most appropriate thing.
Yeah, because maybe there's about public feedback at the public hearing, we know just the actual one right from the get-go, perhaps.
Yeah, well, it would, in this case, it would say, okay, do we, like the individual lots on most areas more than allowing new parks in most areas?
Yeah.
That's what it kind of comes down to. And we can allow all three, of course, but we could decide after the public hearing which route we want to take.
Yeah, and I am interested in looking into if we do allow parks, if we can
Sounds
require
good, Henry.
conservation subdivisions. And I don't know enough about it, but how that would fit
Yeah.
with this. I can look into that.
Yeah, I don't know what you can, but I know, I looked at Jaffrey's, and Jaffrey has, they allow now, apparently they allow new parks. And I think they had some parameters of 10-acre minimum.
Yeah, this PRUD thing, which
Yeah, one of them had for every 30 homes, you had to set aside a certain acreage for open
Yeah, it was,
space.
I think it was like 10,000 square feet per 30 homes you had to set
Yeah.
aside for
Yeah.
open space. So there were some other parameters in a new park.
Yeah.
So there certainly is probably more available to you on that end than there would be on their own lots, because you have to treat
yeah,
manufactured the same.
Just like a single family residence, yep.
So you're kind of limited to what you can do, but
that may help.
At that point.
yeah.
That may help the public perception
Sure.
to think,
Yep.
if it comes next to me, it's gonna be, with some management of the lot, in
Yes.
terms of the density.
Yes.
And letting the public have a voice brings down the animosity of them like not having an opinion. So that was all really good, Henry. I thought what you said.
Yeah, I think the public needs to understand that, if we allow on individual lots, the chances of that are great. If we allow for new parks, the chances of that are pretty slim. That someone's gonna develop new park. So if the goal is none, you actually wanna shoot for the one that's less likely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
it's hard
was-
to.
Some people want
So
The
that,
key-
it's counterintuitive on that sense, right? But-
Yeah, and we'd also need to be feeling pretty good about our manufactured housing ordinance and the content
I
in
think
there.
for new ones, yeah, we could create it however we'd like, right?
But we'd have to propose those changes at the
At the
public
same
hearing.
time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Right.
this could be like
Yeah, that's probably not.
step one, just allow it, catch any of the most horrible things we see in the current manufactured housing park, and then next year make more
stringent.
revisions.
Is there a difference between and I know what Mike was saying. I've seen manufactured homes that look like you know, well-built, regular homes, but they're still labeled manufactured, but trailers, is there a difference between a manufactured home and a trailer home? Or trailer homes are from the old days?
Old days.
Yeah,
All
I think,
manufactured.
yeah, the term trailer is just like the, you know, a slang for it. I
So
think.
now they're always called manufactured homes.
Yeah, I mean, there's,
Yeah.
the state defines manufactured.
I did ask her about that,
It's 'cause they're
and
portable
she should have
underneath
probably,
or
I
something
should have
like
asked it out
You
loud
can do
at
it
that
flat,
meeting,
move
but,
to another place.
I mean, technically my home came on wheels, right, so.
But it can be turned, but it's only or when it's a mobile home, it's that it could be hooked back up and moved, right? If you take all that undercarriage out, it changes it, or it's still a manufactured home?
It would be extremely difficult to move one at this point, like according to the new rules, the axles have to be cut out, right? I don't, you guys know that,
Axles
but
are
she
removed, yeah.
explained that at the meeting, they would have to be cut, well, they're cut off before they're laid down and all that. It's getting, for me, from my layman's perspective, it's getting really hard to blur the lines between a modular and a manufactured.
I think what she said, the main difference is the standards are built to. Manufacturer's built to HUD, modular is built to building code. That's really, they get very similar because manufactured home and modular will both show up on wheels. The difference really comes down to, one's the HUD standard, one's the building code
And
standard.
if I'm, you
Yeah,
can correct me if
it's
I'm wrong, but the
got
HUD's getting closer to building standards every
Right.
time.
Very, very much the same.
Yeah.
Nope, new HUD is 2x6 exterior walls, yep.
Yep.
Yep,
About time.
I put a bunch of them in,
I
so.
wish they do the plumbing right too.
Yep, nope, it's all back plumbing, yep, it's all upgraded wiring, it is all, the HUD code and the regular building code is
Very, very similar.
very similar, yep.
Well, the last one that I did the CO with TJ on, if you guys.
Yeah.
It was a nice house.
Yes, man.
I was
Yeah.
really impressed.
Yeah.
I've been in some, some pretty impressive ones,
Yeah, they have a stigma, and we understand why, you know,
We
from
get
years past, we get it, but, they've definitely changed, and,
well, you can see some, right? We have some on individual lots that you can see that are in disrepair, and
mhm.
then we have some newer ones that, again, are hard to tell the difference between my house and mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I don't think that the townspeople understand with manufactured, again, with the stigma that goes along with them is, we have homes that we've replaced, we've torn down the old home, they had a $5,000 or $6,000 assessment, and the new home has a $165,000 assessment or $180,000 assessment, so, so they do have a higher tax base that comes along with them, so.
I thought the taxes were paid on the whole lot.
Nope, and, we have taxes are paid on the entire lot that we pay, each of the homes pay their building tax, so if you look at
Okay,
a
yeah, that
tax
makes
card for the home, you'll see no land on it, but you see the building.
Yeah, you're
So,
right, yeah,
yeah.
makes sense.
You know, and a building with no land that assesses at $175,000 or $165,000 is a large improvement over what's going out and what's coming in. Who's got my B20 paper?
From the master plan, thanks. It's so funny that the rural district is 51%.
I didn't know that.
Right on.
either. I was expecting the rural district and the mountain district to be similar. I didn't realize the mountain district was as small as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just surprised by the number of parcels. I knew the land would be big. I didn't realize it'd be half of the parcels as
Yeah.
well. And if anything, there's more, there may be more now.
Yeah, it might be a little bit different now, and this is one of the pitfalls of not having the master plan updated.
Yeah.
It's a handy reference to look back and grab a bunch of this information, but I think some of it's still relevant.
It doesn't have solar.
There's no solar.
There's no solar in it.
So can we technically use the current manufactured housing ordinance to kind of cover new subdivisions? As like
Yeah.
a baseline for us?
We
That we're
could,
not totally out to dry, so to speak. I know you mentioned just putting it forward and then work out the details later.
You'd wanna read it just to make sure.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, I wonder if that's an option for us, that kind of gives us something to work off of, rather than nothing to work off of.
and then,
Cause let's say people voted in,
and not that this is the correct way
but
to
we
look
don't have
at
any
it.
standards.
No, and no, the standards are already there.
Yeah.
The standards are already there. What we'd be doing if we decided, hey, we want parks in the majority land area, we would just be adding a new permitted use in that district.
Mhm.
Said manufactured housing parks, you know, according to that's the
And
ordinance.
they'd automatically be covered under the standards of the manufactured housing ordinance.
Right.
Does that include subdivision setups?
Subdivisions, like the subdivisions created for manufactured housing,
Yeah.
I don't have a firm understanding of those.
Yeah, it appears to me it's just like any other subdivision, but
Yeah.
they might be less conforming than.
It's actually, so the town of Troy permits it. I don't know exactly where we permit it, but we permit subdivisions for manufactured housing and don't identify what that is or differentiate that from regular standard subdivisions. So it's our assumption that the subdivision rules that apply everywhere else apply for manufactured housing. So it's just basically doing a subdivision instead of putting, stick builts on there
Yeah.
or modulars, you're putting manufactured on.
And
And it's
that,
been that way for a while and nobody's done one, so.
So does that mean we comply?
that means we
comply with
comply
that?
that.
That part you comply
Yeah,
with,
so good.
so to your point, it is counterintuitive, but allowing something, like that, obviously that's not in everybody's wheelhouse, and I don't recall one ever being done.
Yeah.
And that's been on the books, that's been in our zoning for years and years and years.
So that brings up, are we in compliance with that?
No, we're not, because that's the one that's paired up.
It's paired with
So
parks,
you have to have
Oh,
parks and subdivisions.
it's half in compliance.
Yeah.
On one piece.
I'm just halfway reading on.
It says manufactured housing is permitted only in existing manufactured housing parks or in subdivisions created specifically for manufactured housing in the rural district, subject to the provisions of the Troy Manufactured Housing Park Ordinance and the Troy Subdivision Regulations.
So not that anybody's doing those, but if you did end up, I don't know where it's gonna go and, what people are gonna want, which direction people are gonna wanna go, but if you do go down the road of their own lots, maybe in conjunction with that goes away, because you no longer need that. Not that anybody's doing them, but it is there. And if you're compliant on the first part of it, you don't actually need that, so, unless you want it.
So is the board feel comfortable with Carol preparing multiple?
I think so, I think it'd be best if she did, if she can, because I think we need to see this in print, not just
Yeah,
up in the air.
and then do we want to weigh in now on what she's drafted for the part that would affect that E section, which is reasonable and realistic opportunities for expansion. These are two, if we could decide tonight which option of these we like better.
I think
That would
option one is
answer.
the easiest, it just deletes the paragraph saying that we can't.
Yeah. That's the, yeah. And the proposing a conditional use permit makes me, I don't wanna, since there's already an ordinance with the manufactured housing parks have their own ordinance with permitting through site plan with the Board of Selectmen, why add conditional use standards?
Would the expansion trigger another site plan?
Yeah, I think any expansion, well, actually, it's an expansion with non-residential use triggers site plan. Change of use could trigger site plan. Multifamily is one of the criteria for site plan review. Let me pull it up. But it goes to the planning board's like 4 or 5 criteria. We get to decide what development is considered, falls under that.
Well, they'd be making a change to the site plan, let's say a site plan allows, let's just throw a number out, 30, and they built 30, they're gonna add more, and they update the site plan. It's like the storage units, they wanted to add 3 more buildings or whatever it was, they had to update their site plan. Because it's no longer gonna match what was being built. We had to adjust the site plan for the new buildings, and we had to adjust it for the vegetation of the new driveway.
Who was this that you did?
The storage place across from Dollar General,
Oh, okay.
yep, they had an old site plan, they built to that. And they came back in and revamped the site plan, updated it because they added 2 more in the back, and then they changed one of they added a driveway.
So they had to redo the whole
They
site
redid
plan.
the site plan.
That makes sense, right?
So, my understanding would be, if an existing park was gonna expand, and their current site plan had, let's say, 30 units, and they already had 30, they're gonna add 31 or 32, 1 or 2 more, they'd have to come in for a site plan. And update the site plan to match that. That would be my
Yeah.
thought, because,
I think it's up to the planning board.
yeah,
But the criteria are if there's new construction of non-residential or multifamily, it'd be, I suppose, considered multifamily. Although I'm not 100% sure on that. And there's, if the proposal involves expansion of a building or intensification of use, it would result in
Well,
a change in traffic.
adding more housing would be intensification.
Yeah, 2 wouldn't be, adding 2 units probably wouldn't.
No, but I'm
trigger-
just using that as a number, I don't even know how many
Yeah.
are currently there.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, if
It
there's
should all be
already,
registered somewhere, right? So if it doesn't go through the planning board, who the hell knows what's going on?
yeah, no, I'm not saying like a 30 unit.
I don't care if it's 1,
If 1 would be added, it should go through site plan.
I would have to think so. When the lot size changes, when the footprint changes, it should go through the planning board.
Well, there are specific requirements for site plan review, I think you just look at what the requirements are.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I like how this option 2 mentions the current HUD standards. I feel like that's something we wanna add elsewhere. But did any other board
Well, we
members?
could add, if you wanted to add current HUD federal manufactured home construction safety standards, you could add that under section 5 in the current ordinance. You have A. It says, all manufactured homes permitted under this ordinance shall meet with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Mobile Home Construction Safety Standards 1978.
Okay,
We could
just change the name.
remove, change that to read current HUD federal manufactured home construction.
Yeah,
Because standards 1978.
They weren't, yeah, you don't want 1978 standards if you can avoid that.
So I think we need to have, I think option 1 is the cleanest for
yeah,
that. And then we should actually have a amendment to section 5 construction safety standards A, remove mobile home construction safety standards of 1978 and put in
yeah,
current HUD federal manufactured home construction safety standards. So that gives us that.
right,
It's kind of already built in there, we're just changing verbiage. And then the only other thing we gotta do is have her draft up some options for individual lot subdivision, that kind of new part. Cause that kind of covers the 2. And gets your HUD in there, technically updates our ordinance to be more compliance,
yeah,
you know. Probably should have done that sooner, probably, 1978.
but if we're not allowing them, it's,
Yeah.
there's no point.
Probably wasn't, but now that we're in that boat, I think that's something we should do. And it's a simple thing, it's just a verbiage. You're changing a sentence. It's pretty easy to do.
They sell like 1979 models on eBay or something. Jaguar or what?
But that's the antique market for those, the custom rest.
They have taillights on the back of those.
Right. I think, yeah, I like that.
Like the red one's up for Christmas and the orange one's up for Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. Just push the pedal.
Carol, are you still on, and do you need like a planning board volunteer or anything to help you craft the amendments?
I don't think so, Henry. I'm just going through, I think that what I've understood is that you want to post well, not the two you already did earlier because you voted those to ballot. So you want to post these that we're looking at tonight and just see what you get for a response. My only question is, did you want to also include in the posting, sort of throwing it out for a response to the option of allowing manufactured housing on individual lots or in new parks and subdivisions?
I think this answer is yes.
Okay.
And what I'm not clear is, can we list these with like ors in the choices?
Oh yeah, because, right, this is just really to get feedback.
Oh,
And you do have time, so you wouldn't if you decided to choose one or the other, you would not have to have another public hearing. You just remove the one that you're not going to go with.
yeah. I think to give us the flexibility, we want them both to be listed and not portraying it like we're going to pick one or the other, because
Right.
conceivably we might pick both, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so when do you want to have the public hearing? We could just make the notice so that you could have it in 2 weeks on the 18th, so you've still got both meetings in January to do this, but you wouldn't want to wait until the last one just in case you needed to change anything.
Wouldn't we wanna see what you write up before the board and vote on it,
Yeah.
before the public hearing?
Well, yeah, I mean, typically, yes, you would, but then you are down to your first meeting in January to have the public hearing. And if you need changes, then you really only got one more chance. I mean, we could always post for the hearing and you look at it and say, oh my God, what were you thinking? You know, and then we move on to the next hearing in January. But if you're okay with some of them, then we might at least get one or two off the table.
Because at let's say the 18th, if we didn't like how the mobile homes ones were written, we could table that portion of the public hearing until the next meeting.
I'd be okay with
Well,
having
you
that.
could, or, you know, you could throw it out there at the 18th and see what you get for a response. And then we know what to do for the next hearing.
I'd also be okay with having an extra planning board meeting and taking a look at what Carol writes up.
Well, right into the holidays,
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
January, probably could do
have
that,
it
but
before
not, not really.
Right, you talk
Yeah,
about
in a,
before the
like in
18th.
a week or so.
well, I guess the question is when can
You would
Carol
have to notice.
write this up?
You wouldn't make the notice.
No, we have a meeting.
We
Yeah,
have
just a
a
meeting.
non-public
We can't
hearing.
meet next week. Sorry.
Oh, how,
Except the notice will have to be in this Saturday's paper if you were going to have a hearing on the 18th.
I don't think we were looking to have a hearing, I think we were looking to just go over it before.
and then notice from there.
Okay. Yeah, I think she was just saying that it gives us less flexibility later.
January 8th would be the next meeting, because the first is New Year's. Unless you met a different day than Wednesday, but the next Wednesday we meet in January on the 8th.
So logistically speaking, couldn't you do the, notice of public hearing, with the kind of generic language that you've done in the past? And then next week, work on the, whatever Carol prepares as the actual language, so that when you get to public hearing, that information is made available?
I don't know. Don't we have to
Don't you
notice
have to, yeah.
the 10 days, like what we're going to share at the hearing, like exact verbatim?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
saw the last
issue
one you
with-
did, and
With the seventh, if you were going to have a hearing on the 18th, for example, the notice would have to be in the paper on Saturday, this coming Saturday, and the language would have to be in the office by Monday, your first business day.
okay.
So that's, yeah, so if you chose then to not have a hearing on the 18th, your next meeting would be January 1st. That's not happening, I presume. So if we move to the 8th, then you have one more chance, and that would be the 22nd, because everything has to be done by February 4th. And you couldn't have another one anytime after that, because you have to have at least 2 weeks in between zoning hearings. So the clock is ticking.
Do you have a recommendation, Carol?
Well, I mean, I think that, I would be okay with going ahead and posting for the 18th, because then whatever you decide, we've got time to have another hearing, and some of these things, like I said, might pass muster on the 18th, some of the simpler ones. And then we take those off the table and only have, the more complex ones to deal with.
Because obviously whatever you share for a draft has to be available to the public, can be modified at the public hearing.
Right.
So,
Right.
not like we're tied to whatever's written there.
Well, we're tied to whatever's written for that hearing.
Yeah.
But if
Right.
we can make a new hearing after
Yeah.
the one the 18th.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
address changes. I mean, it works for me. Carol, we lean on you to actually prepare this stuff and coordinate with Elizabeth.
Mhm.
And I think you said, that would have to start tomorrow or Friday at the latest, right? So.
Well, the verbiage would have to be in by Monday, and the notice would have to be by.
Oh, yeah. the
Yeah,
notice
I
would
can
have
get
to
the
be as
notice
complete.
to Abby tomorrow,
Okay.
and I can have the draft language to her by Monday.
Okay. Are you in tomorrow, Elizabeth?
Hopefully, if the snow isn't
Oh, right.
making it so you can't be here.
Is that plows that I keep hearing?
Yeah,
Is it starting to?
it's on the roads.
Cool.
Getting home's gonna be.
We're gonna ski in tomorrow.
Well, if there's a problem with Abby getting into the office, I can email the notice that, no, I've done that in the past, so
I'll
that's
have my
not a
laptop
problem.
with me.
Okay.
I will
I'll
be
just send
working.
her an email in the morning and find out if she's there, and if she's not, I'll assume that she's snowbound,
And she,
and I'll just send it to the paper myself.
I'll be working from home if I'm not in the office,
Oh,
so
you will?
I'll be able
Okay.
to send it no matter what.
okay.
She is dedicated.
Very, very dedicated.
Alright, so that covers that. The June.
There's one in the back, which should be pretty.
One in the
straightforward.
back, yeah.
We can just get it out of the way.
Amend section 6 of the Water Resources Protection District as follows, conditional uses. So we're just adding 3 and then adjusting 4.
Right.
Yes, the reason for this, Henry pointed this out when we were going through the conditional use application for the solar project, that the only place in the Water Resources Protection Ordinance that really speaks to the conditional use permit is for the construction of roads. And it left us kind of struggling with what to do with, they had applied for a conditional use permit, but what they were asking for didn't fall under that roads or access ways or, the power lines thing. So I've just tried to shift it a little bit so that the only criteria that are in that ordinance for conditional use, those A through E, that now those would apply to anything that's affecting that district, and not just roads and transmission lines.
Carol, can you comment on how typical that is? Is this,
It's not at all typical.
Okay.
The standing language is totally typical, and
Oh.
I had never actually paid attention to it before until we came across it in this application.
Oh.
And I'm doing an ordinance for another town right now that's running up against the same thing. So we're proposing exactly this kind of change,
okay,
so that it applies to everything and not just to that one thing.
Yeah, my only concern is, if we had gone by this criteria, we would not have done the waiver. That A,
Well, there's your,
there's, for example, C, no reasonable alternative exists to avoid wetlands alteration. Do we need to be this restrictive?
I think we kind of, yes, because this also gives you, you're looking for your reason to be able to say no sometimes. This is your,
Well, in this particular case with Rewild, they were able to work with with the environmental services,
Yeah.
and they'll get the wetlands permit, and they'll move forward. So, this is more restrictive than DES will require.
no reasonable alternative exists.
I mean, I don't know enough about it, but is it sufficient to lean, and our justification for giving that waiver was that we were leaning on DES's determination for the permit. Is that reasonable to rely on them?
well, we had no, I think the issue is we didn't have really.
Oh, no, I know, I
And
actually
that's
thought
what
it was
we did.
reasonable, but
This now gives us something, so I mean,
Well, that verbiage is already in there, it was just strictly based around forestry and tree farming, right? That was the.
Is 4A through E, this is newly added?
No, that's
No,
existing.
A3
only the stuff in bold is added.
Oh, I thought when it was, okay, so the stuff
Literally.
under it is already here.
Yeah,
but it didn't apply to the other uses.
Right.
It just applied to 1 and 2.
Okay.
So what this does is, again, using Rewild Solar, because it's a permitted use in the underlying zone district, these standards now apply to them.
Well, it doesn't apply to Rewild because it'll be okay.
I'll use it as an
Right,
example
sure,
so we can
sure,
understand.
Sure.
It would apply to anything that
Yeah, anything, so,
instead of just the two mentioned uses.
Are the wetlands already, like, if I came to Troy and said I wanna build somewhere, like, is everything already identified as wetlands? Are they already,
most,
not always.
not always.
so is
So-
that when you file a site plan for something, then the state, whoever the building or whoever the inspectors are, they'll come in and look it over, and then they'll say, no, you can't, cause this is wetlands? Or they have to go by what is written here?
Well, they have to go by what's written here, but one of the requirements of the site plan is for developers to map wetlands on property.
So it's on onus is on them to
Yes.
determine it.
Right.
But if they wanna hide it, I'm just asking, cause I know one of my neighbors just came in.
Site
and
plans
did
have to
clear
have
cut
an
stuff.
engineered stamp, so.
Oh, okay, so they
If
have to.
they're gonna
prove-
hide that, they're putting their license and everything on the line.
Okay,
Granted, we are kind of, when someone brings in an engineered stamp plan, we do kind of assume they're telling the truth and being
When
professional.
you have, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, when you have your land surveyed, they'll identify any new wetlands that were not on.
Not always.
No.
We don't require wetland delineation for all subdivisions.
why?
I mean, well, one case is someone wants to subdivide like a 200-acre lot, right? And it would be like a monumental undertaking for them to do it. The other,
Yeah, but what if there is wetlands and there's animal, like,
yeah,
so,
it's the
I
planning
guess
board's
it
decision
depends
to
too,
require
are they
that.
just subdivided to split it off or sell a piece? maybe wetlands don't matter, it might matter whoever buys and builds on it. But if you just subdivide a piece of property, do the wetlands matter, just to change the property line or add one?
Doesn't the lot have to be so big before you don't have to delineate the wetlands?
I don't know.
I mean, 200-acre lot, obvious, you cut it in half, you've got plenty of room where there's gonna be no wetlands to build. Okay, but if you have a 5-acre lot, that might be a different story.
Yeah.
I think to Kyle's point, really what he's talking about is if you're just subdividing a lot, wetlands don't have any issue because you're not doing anything with the lot, you're just changing the lot line.
Now, after you subdivide, you then want to go build a house or something there.
That would require.
Then you probably want to map,
Well,
you know,
Then it's gotta be
that would
delineated.
require.
so I think it depends on the circumstances, you know.
Right.
If someone walks in, wants to split the 200-acre parcel in half, because maybe they want to get the other half of the sun, we're not gonna look at wetlands and just splitting it. When the son comes in and says, hey, I wanna build a garage here, well, now let's hope you split it right. So,
Jack, going back to the terms, are you focused on C as the one that's most problematic?
Actually, A's probably the most problematic because it's related to roads. You know, 1 and 2 were mainly giving access to wetlands because of roads, you know, access for forestry and tree farming and constructions of roads. So the proposed construction is essential to the productive use of land not within the district. So that we would have never gotten by that one.
Is essential to the production. Yeah.
So here you know, it's because somebody needs access to it and they
Yeah,
need to go through
yeah.
a wetland.
but do you have to meet all A, B, C, D, and E, or just the ones that apply to the situation? Because, again, this use rewild, and it's already done. C would probably apply to them for this conditional uses, but you're right, A probably might not apply to them. Do they have to meet A through E, or do they have to meet the ones that are
Yeah.
applicable to the application?
Yeah.
And like site plan review, we have a checklist.
Right.
You don't have to meet them all because some of them don't apply.
Yeah. It needs to be clarified.
I think these are I read these as ands, but
Yeah, I would too. I mean, I think the way to fix it would be to keep these like.
I think it would, easy would be
With
number
force.
4.
Mhm.
All proposed uses are subject to the following applicable conditions. So if they apply to what you're doing,
Yeah, I think people could people get around that, or would that be consistently applied?
I think if we just take A out, you know, keep A with 1 and 2, and for other uses, we just go B, C, D, E, and like get us by.
Can we have something in it that says that wetland mappings needs to be done up front?
That's part of well, it's part of the site plan review process.
But you just said if it's a 200-acre lot, they don't have to identify the wetlands. Only it comes later, but why don't we make them identify it up front so that there's not problems down the road and we're having to, like, you know, dicker about it?
We could, but that wouldn't be. I was just thinking, we would make that change in a different ordinance, not in the Water Resources Protection District.
Yes, exactly.
So it would be another amendment. Amend, you know, site plan review regulations.
That would be around
all
site plans, not around
plans.
water?
Correct.
And you only require that delineation when there is construction or building. Henry's example of a 200-acre lot, if they're going to put a house over in the, you know, the back 4, there's no reason to have someone spend that kind of money when there's going to be no construction going on anywhere near that wetland. When they go for a building permit and there's some indication that there's wetland, then yes, that has to be done. And that's part of, that says so in this ordinance. and it says so in subdivision and site plan as well. So I think you're covered.
Okay,
Yeah, because you don't have to really delineate what's wetlands near where they're building and setbacks. You don't necessarily need to do the 200 acres.
right, okay.
That's quite the cost.
Jeez, I had someone else who didn't know not delineating was an option.
In Troy, I think it is.
This was a long time ago in a different state. It's quite a large project.
So you think A should move to 1 and 2?
I think all five can apply to 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I think for other, it should only be B, C, D, E.
So am I hearing that 1 and 2, A to E would apply, but number 3, only everything but A?
Yes. Yeah, that's my read.
So everything but A, okay, let's see. Let me shift things around.
I think C is still problematic.
Well, except it says lessens the impact.
It lessens the
And
impact.
Leewile did go to this.
Like by adjusting where they were developing.
Yeah, and they even took some panels out that were in the proximity of the wetland, the wetland and things, so,
Yeah.
I mean, DES walked the land with them and they modified their plan to lessen the impacts. I mean, it's still more rigorous than I think we need, but if we're wanting to be prudent and get this done, well, not prudent, but if we want to get this done.
Sounds good.
Burden payment or not?
So I think that one's ready for public hearing
Yeah,
too.
ready. Yeah. Just those minor changes. All right. Carol, you got that?
No, I didn't, sorry.
That last one we just talked about, put that for public hearing too?
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay.
All right. Anything else on the agenda? What time is it? 10? Well,
9:57.
not that I don't like you guys, but they were tied up tonight, we had nothing else.
Is that a 2-mile drive home? Oh, you're pretty good. Was that,
You guys
sorry.
don't want to see it?
Yeah,
Oh,
cause
that
I'll,
way.
like, between the holidays, and I don't wanna miss that much
The
time.
next meeting will be December 18th, which will also be a public hearing. Do you have a seconds update?
I didn't get the agenda either.
Perfect, that makes it short and sweet.
I know water and sewer didn't be there.
So bring pitchforks?
No, we're just gonna go over some, we have a shared employee for some duties that we need to finalize how we fund that.
Pitchfork it is. All right, let's adjourn
You're
at
scaring me, they bring pitchforks?
9:58. I got spears.